Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So Senator Elissa Slotkin went on Breaking Points to talk to Krystal and Saagar Enjeti. This is the program where they have opposing views. Krystal is on the left, Saagar is on the right. They sort of debate things, although they've kind of met in the middle in a weird way. And that's sort of the point of Breaking Points and their original program, which was Rising, and then they went independent with it because the Rising is owned by The Hill, and I believe they're still doing that show. So, you know, the point of it is to highlight these different kind of sides, viewpoints, but increasingly with Saagar and Krystal's independent project, there's been this weird kind of melding, I guess, around populism or, you know, things like the Epstein files or the war in Gaza. It seems like Krystal and Saagar are pretty aligned in terms of this war on Gaza, although I don't know all the things Saagar's said about it, and it's probably like the typical conservative perspective on this, and you see it reflected a little bit in this interview where he's kind of like, is it worth it? Like, this is looking worse and worse. It's taking up more and more space in the news cycle. It makes Trump look bad. It makes everybody look bad. Nobody likes seeing this. At this point, the pro-Palestinian movement has effectively made it clear to everyone what's happening in Gaza and the fact that we are funding it. So if you ever find yourself thinking that this movement has worked against itself or has been counterproductive, all movements you can point to and say that, but the reality is people would not be as aware as they are of what's happening in Gaza, and the media and Democrats and representatives like Elissa Slotkin would 100% let Israel get away with what it's doing without questioning it if it wasn't for people who have not shut up about this since it started. And not only has that made it a part of the national conversation, but now even when we're in a Republican presidential administration, you're still seeing that this issue of Gaza has a certain amount of sway even amongst conservatives. And so a lot of people have been questioning, why would Elissa Slotkin do this interview? They talked about Zohran Mamdani, they talked a little bit about the Epstein files, but Krystal really put the focus on Israel, and it's pretty clear from the interview that that's not what Elissa Slotkin was expecting. And Krystal asked her about that at one point. She said, why did you come on here? So I guess we'll get to that later. This clip has been passed around a decent amount. I wanted to highlight some different parts of it. I'm not sure if these are the same parts that other people are talking about. But I thought the interesting thing about Elissa Slotkin's answers here, like with a lot of politicians, the most interesting part of her answers is what she didn't say and sort of like what she almost says. So that's what I want to focus on a little bit here. And also just how sharp Krystal is in this interview. And she really goes for the throat. She comes out the gate swinging in this. And Elissa Slotkin was clearly not prepared for that. So let's check it out a little bit.
Forgive me if this is impolite. Like, I'm curious why you wanted to talk to us.
What do you mean?
Well, like, we don't have actually a lot of senators, especially ones who have very different ideology than us, reach out. So I'm curious what your goal was and why you thought to come here.
Well, first of all, I think you have a good audience. I mean, right?
We agree.
If you appealed to like 4 friends on YouTube or whatever, then I probably wouldn't be here. But I think, to me, part of the problem is that people have kind of gone to their corners. And I live this, right? I live on my family farm in a town that voted heavily for Donald Trump. I've never won my town. I've never won my precinct. I've never won my neighbors. We get along, but I never won them, and I probably never will. So to me, I think that the people have gone to their corners, and like people who used to be able to talk about politics and disagree don't even get in the same room together. So I kind of like the idea of your show. Like, it was interesting to me when my team pitched me, right? We go through, and like, there's no hiding it. Lots of people are like, how do we evolve in this new space?
I'm just being really real with you. I don't really hear what you say if you are still supporting a genocide in Gaza. And that's for me, I'm speaking for myself, but I know there are millions of other people who feel the same, that you have to at least cross this sort of moral threshold. And what it indicates to people, and I think part of why, Zoran won so many people in New York City, young people in particular, but Jewish New Yorkers, people across the board, is because it was a sign of, number one, okay, you're focused on New York City first and foremost.
Sure.
Number two, you're willing to take the heat on an issue that is really difficult for you, where you're being overtly smeared as an anti-Semite. And number three, there's no, entrenched interest that's going to control. You have a spine, you have principles, you're willing to stand up for something. And so, I'm curious for your reflections on that because of your voting record and where you've stood on this conflict.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the proudest moments that I had in my last election, where I just won on the same ballot as Donald Trump, was that I won a majority of Jewish voters in Michigan. We have a large Jewish population. And I won Dearborn Heights, and Hamtramck, the three Muslim-dominated cities. Trump won 2 out of the 3. So I think the thing that I would push back on is the voters vote with their feet, right? We have a moment in an election where they get to decide. And there was no issue that was more difficult for me in this last, I would say 6 years, but certainly in this last election, other than this issue, because it's personal. I'm a Middle East analyst by training. And so what I tried to do, and why I think I managed to win both those communities, is call balls and strikes, literally up to this week, on what's going on.
So let's talk a little bit more about that.
But I think it's important, right? If you're going to push on me, then I think like there's one of us that's had an election and had to appeal to my voters and win. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that Mr. Mamdani won. Or actually, I didn't know his name. I didn't know much about him until he won. But because I think this issue is motivating people in a very visceral and personal way.
Yeah.
But it's not the only issue that my voters in Michigan care about.
Of course.
And the online world is extremely, extremely focused on this, but that doesn't always represent the majority. To me, the most important thing is a pressurized campaign to get aid into people who are starving. That to me is the number one, because that's the one is urgent and today.
For example, if Senator Slotkin, if you were asked to support defensive weapons for Iran, defensive weapons for Russia, you wouldn't back that.
No, but Iran, but
they're defensive. They're just protecting civilians, right?
Right.
So how is it different?
But because Israel's being shot at.
So is Russia.
So is Iran.
Yeah.
So is Russia.
Ukraine's shooting at Russia right now.
I'm sorry. This is the difference between allies, partners, and adversaries.
Why is it an ally then? What are they doing right now that which makes it an ally?
I think allied relationships, just like Lithuania right now, like an allied relationship or a partner relationship is a long-standing relationship of information sharing and diplomacy.
Last question, because your staff is telling us, do you think AIPAC should register as a foreign lobby?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that I know plenty of people who think they should. I don't.
It's kind of a cop-out answer, don't you think?
I literally, I just guess I'd have to look at the definition. I certainly have had my tough moments with that organization. And
so you stop accepting their funding?
You gotta get your facts straight. I have not been endorsed by AIPAC. I'm sorry. I was the first Jew elected to the Senate that was not endorsed by any Jewish group. AIPAC, J Street.
You've been the recipient of their funds.
In 2018, when I first ran, people who were members, yes. But I've not been endorsed since then. And I just gotta be honest, I think that this is where facts really matter. I've had very, very difficult conversations with my colleagues in that organization and made a choice back in 2021. So that was the first time I was up for re-election. So
excellent interview from Krystal here. She really goes for the throat. You can tell that she wanted to take out some of this anger. I feel like Krystal Ball is kind of looking at Slotkin as like an avatar of the Democratic Party as a whole. And there's good reason for that. It might have felt a little bit unfair to her as an individual sitting there in the chair because, again, she wasn't expecting an interview like this. However, the Democratic Party has kind of floated her as a leading face in the party, and she was the one who did the State of the Union response, the Democratic response to Donald Trump's State of the Union in March. So they're trying to put her out there as a leader for the party. This is like a former CIA official. She mentions in this interview that she was doing operations in the Middle East, analysis when it comes to, CIA information on the Middle East. That's what informs her, pro-Israel background and voting record politically. And she also just has like a very military-focused voting record. So this is her background. However, I think the thing that she mentions in this interview about how she won in Michigan, she won, predominantly Muslim cities that Donald Trump also won. So that's an interesting dynamic. And I think that that's why the Democrats wanted to push her as like, this is an example of what our party looks like going forward. However, the reality is, the pool that they're looking at in terms of who voted this person into office, obviously there are enough Democrats in the mix or Democrat-leaning people in the mix that they voted for a Democratic senator. But again, these are the same people who went for Donald Trump, at least, district by district. So this is an example of the right-leaning type of Democrat that the Democratic Party wants to put forward as their answer to Donald Trump. And so they want to make her the face of essentially the conservative wing of the party. And so I think that's why Krystal Ball really lasered in here, because she recognized not only is this somebody that is trying to, create their profile as a relatable Democrat. She's not going on the lefty shows, she wants to go on Breaking Points because she feels like it's a right and left. I'm sure she was sold on this show because of the idea that she could kind of bounce back and forth between right and left and, I agree with you here and here's the blah, blah, blah. That's exactly how she wants to paint herself. That is not how this went down at all. Really, Saagar asks a couple questions at the beginning and then kind of just steps out of the way and lets Krystal Ball. And Krystal Ball is just going at her the entire time. And the very few times that Saagar does pipe up, it's kind of in agreement with Krystal Ball. And saying things like, what has Israel really done that makes them an ally? And her answer to that question was interesting, where she mentions information specifically. She says we share information, and I don't remember what the other thing was, resources. And that is exactly what Israel is an ally of ours for, is information. And she knows that because she was in the CIA. And that's what Israel is there for, is to collect information for the West, essentially, or for the United States in the Middle East, in a region that without Israel, it had no control over, no stake in, no foothold in. So that's the purpose that Israel serves in the Middle East from like a Western hegemony perspective. And that's why they're valuable to the United States. And that's why they, have the right to defend themselves at all costs. And that's why so many senators and people in power in the United States will kind of repeat these pro-Israel or AIPAC talking points at a moment's notice. That's what they represent within our military and intelligence structure, is a military gathering operation in the Middle East. And Elissa Slotkin knows this. She kind of dances around it, but that's the reality, and that's why somebody like her is never going to vote against Israel, never going to vote against defensive weapons or offensive weapons to Israel. There's a separate question of why a congresswoman like AOC would vote for that. That's a different question that I haven't discussed. Maybe I'll get back around to that in this one if I can. But essentially, she mentions here that she hasn't taken any money from AIPAC, and that you got to get your facts right, Krystal, and that she is not endorsed by AIPAC. But then she also mentions earlier, she says, yes, earlier in my career when I was a member in the House, she says, yes, members, as in members of AIPAC. Interesting thing about that is that that's exactly what Ted Cruz said about it when asked by Tucker Carlson. He said, well, I think I've taken money from members of AIPAC. So that's one way that you kind of dilute this idea that taking money from that entity or those people affiliated with that entity is going to affect what you say. But then there's the broader question of, okay, so let's say Elissa Slotkin has no ties to AIPAC. She's had tough conversations with them. That's a very interesting and very specific thing to say. Doesn't exactly paint the picture that she has no relationship with them at all, does it? But let's say that she doesn't. Why is it that her votes are so consistently in favor of what they want then? That indicates a kind of capture in our politics that goes beyond who AIPAC directly is donating their money to. And same thing with AOC. I mean, people are accusing her of being, AIPAC or AIPAC affiliated. And I mean, that's just not true. She's never taken money from AIPAC or anyone affiliated with AIPAC, as far as I can tell. So for some reason, in the case of AOC, she feels political pressure to vote in favor of, say, the Iron Dome, more so than, other progressive colleagues. And, she made her argument that there's a difference between voting for the defensive weapons of the Iron Dome versus the offensive weapons. However, if you think about it, functionally, there's no difference. Politically, if you vote to prevent any kind of weapon going to Israel, you are applying political pressure on Israel and their military to behave differently, more responsibly, stop what they're doing, whatever. So it kind of doesn't matter which of the weapons that you are threatening to withhold. Because either one applies pressure, although there's no doubt that defensive versus offensive creates different political dynamics internally in America. That's the kind of thing that AOC is responding to that is frustrating a lot of people on the left, because she got into Congress to, not be influenced by those pressures. But again, we have a problem where it's like she is not in the pocket of AIPAC, and yet she's still in some ways behaving as though she is. And Elissa Slotkin is a worse version of that. If it's true that she has no real affiliation, if they're not actively giving her money, then why is she so aligned with them? There's a real question to be had there. So Krystal Ball did a good job here. This is what it looks like when you don't care about somebody coming back on your program, and you don't care about maintaining access to them or maintaining a good relationship with them, but rather you're trying to get some answers out of them. And, Krystal Ball was very targeted, very specific here in what she wanted to talk about. Clearly, it was not what Slotkin wanted to talk about. Clearly, they also didn't pay a lot of attention to the political leanings of the people she was talking to. They got the concept of the show right, but they didn't really expect that Krystal Ball was not going to allow this conversation to go on without addressing this elephant in the room, as she puts it. And good on her for that, because it's good to remind these politicians that there's a human aspect to this as well. And I think even in the case of journalists, commentators, to be able to show some real humanity about this stuff, it reminds people that there's a human being behind these questions that are being asked. And I think that is lacking in a lot of the corporate media. They're not allowed to put themselves out there like that, or on the issues where they are allowed to put themselves out there, it's under more controlled circumstances, whereas a message like this finds itself under a lot more constraint in the mainstream media. So, I mean, this is why Democrats don't go on platforms like this. It's not because, they don't pay attention to how much the audience is there. It's not because they think, the online world isn't reflective of the real world. It's because they know that people online are beholden to their audiences. And so those are the kind of questions that you're going to get. And that can work in your favor, and it can work against you. She probably would have been better off going on Pod Save America. Maybe she has before. I doubt she'll be coming back on Breaking Points. But it's always good to get a reminder of what actual political journalism looks like. Like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. I'm also running a live stream now of my own music and content 24/7. So go check that out if you're interested in the music. You can drop a comment in the chat. Tell me what you think of the music or ask me a question. I'm going to be kind of checking in on the chat there regularly, just to talk to you guys if you have any questions for me or want to suggest things. And then if you send super chats in there too, I can read those on the pod. Just some new things that I'm trying out. I also got my website up with a little bit of merch on there, just a hoodie and a hat for now. I'm selling those at retail price just to try to get some stuff out there. So if any of that is your cup of tea, check it out and become a member if you want access to exclusive music and different kinds of content before anybody else gets it.